On July 17, 1981, a simple construction shortcut led to one of the deadliest building collapses in U.S. history, causing 114 people to die. So, who signed off on the change? And why didn't anyone catch the mistake before it was too late? And what about the survivors? How do you move on after watching the floor disappear beneath your feet? The answers will shock you. This isn't just a story about a structural failure. It's about human error, missed warnings, and the terrifying cost of cutting corners. Ready to find out how it all unraveled? Here's how it all went so horribly wrong. The hotel was part of the Crown Center complex owned by Hallmark Cards. Yep, the same Hallmark that makes greeting cards. Hallmark wanted to help make Kansas City better during some really tough times. You see, the late 1970s were super hard for many people. Jobs were scarce, and lots of people couldn't find work. Prices for everything kept going up and up. And if you wanted to borrow money, forget about it. Interest rates were sky high. Because money was so tight, many building projects were rushed through. And when people rush, they make mistakes. One of these rushed projects was the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Workers broke ground and started building it in May 1978. After 2 years of construction, the hotel finally opened its doors on July 1, 1980. The main building shot up 40 stories into the sky. It had these huge spaces for meetings and fancy events. But the most special part was its multi-story atrium. What's an atrium? The atrium is like a giant indoor courtyard with tons of open space going up several floors. These walkways connected the north and south sides of the hotel. They weren't small. Each walkway stretched about 120 feet long. Each one weighed around 64,000 pounds. Now here's where things get important. The original design had these walkways hanging by steel rods. These rods were supposed to go straight from the ceiling through both the fourth floor and second floor walkways, kind of like a string going through two beads. But during construction, someone changed this plan. Well, they thought their way would be easier to build, and honestly, it probably was. Instead of using one long rod for both walkways, like that string through beads, they used two separate sets of rods. One set connected the ceiling to the fourth floor walkway. Then, another set connected the fourth floor walkway down to the second floor walkway. This small change might not sound like a big deal, but it created a huge problem. Can you figure out what went wrong? The fourth floor walkway now had to hold not just its own weight, but also had to support the second floor walkway too. It's like if you were not only carrying your backpack, but also had to carry your friend's backpack hanging from yours. That's twice as heavy. The support beams just weren't strong enough for all this extra weight. And making things even worse, the bolts holding everything together went through welded joints in the beams. From the very beginning, even before the change, the walkways could only hold about 60% of the weight required by Kansas City's building codes. It just wasn't safe enough, and with these design changes, the walkways became a disaster just waiting to happen. And happen it did, but no one saw it coming until it was too late. It was another fun Friday night. The Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City was buzzing with excitement. Around 1,600 people had gathered in the hotel's grand atrium for something called a tea dance. This one had a special 1940s theme, and people were dressed up in their fanciest clothes. People were dancing, laughing, and just having fun together. And get this, some lucky folks were standing on those walkways we talked about, watching all the action from above. They probably thought they had the best view in the house. Little did they know those were the worst spots to be that night. The band was playing great music. A dance contest had just started. Everything seemed absolutely perfect. People were smiling. Couples were dancing. Kids were watching with wide eyes. It was exactly what the hotel designers had dreamed of when they built that beautiful atrium. Then, at exactly 7:05 p.m., something went terribly wrong. First, there were some popping sounds. Kind of like when you step on a plastic water bottle or when wood starts to crack. A few people looked up, worried, but most kept dancing. They probably thought it was just part of the music or someone dropping something. Then came a much louder sound, a terrible cracking noise that echoed through the whole atrium. This was followed by a scary metallic clang that no one could ignore. Now everyone was looking up. The fourth floor walkway, where about 16 to 20 people were standing, suddenly began to pull away from the ceiling. Can you imagine standing there and feeling the floor move under your feet? Within just seconds, it completely broke loose. The walkway didn't just fall on its own. It crashed right onto the second floor walkway below it. That walkway had about 40 more people on it. Neither walkway could handle what was happening. Both collapsed together like a sandwich, sending 65 tons of concrete and steel crashing down onto the crowded lobby floor where people had been dancing just moments before. The sound was deafening. Boom! People said it was like a giant explosion. Glass shattered everywhere. The beautiful music instantly changed to terrified screams that in just seconds. Many people were trapped under huge piles of twisted metal and chunks of broken concrete. The happy party had turned into the worst disaster anyone there had ever seen. The first emergency responders got to the hotel super fast. Firefighters, paramedics, and doctors from 5 different hospitals all raced to help. But when they arrived, what they saw was this massive pile of steel, concrete, and broken glass. And underneath it all were people, lots of people, trapped and hurt. The emergency workers knew right away this was going to be one of the hardest rescue operations they'd ever done. Over 900 emergency workers came to help, and they brought 34 fire trucks and medical teams from all the hospitals around. And they kept working for 14 whole hours. But rescuing people wasn't easy at all. The pile of wreckage was super unstable. The spaces were really tight, making it hard to reach people who were trapped. And to make things even worse, the hotel's sprinkler system had broken, causing water to flood the lobby. This meant some trapped survivors were in danger of drowning while rescuers tried to reach them. Even with all these challenges, people did amazing things that night. Hotel workers who weren't hurt helped get guests out and gave first aid to injured people. Some doctors who were at a convention nearby heard about the disaster and ran over to help. And regular people, just normal folks who happened to be there, jumped in to pull victims from the rubble. One amazing story is about 11-year-old Dalton Grant and his mom. They were trapped under the wreckage for more than 6 hours. Rescuers had to work super carefully to get them out without causing more collapse. When they finally freed Dalton, everyone cheered. The very last person rescued alive was a man named Mark Williams. He was trapped for more than 9 hours before rescuers could get him out. He had really bad injuries, broken bones, cuts all over, and was barely conscious when they found him. But he survived. 3 days after the disaster, on July 20th, 1981, Kansas City officials knew they needed expert help to figure out exactly what happened. They asked the National Bureau of Standards, NBS, to investigate the collapse. The request was endorsed by Senators Thomas F. Eagleton and John C. Danforth, and NBS engineers arrived on site the next day, July 21st. They examined every inch of the atrium. They went through tons of debris that had been carefully saved in a warehouse. They even built models in their labs to test different theories. It was like a giant science project to solve a deadly mystery. What did they find out? Remember that design change we talked about earlier? The investigators confirmed that it was definitely the main cause of the disaster. Originally, the walkways were supposed to hang from the ceiling using continuous rods, like hanging 2 yo-yos on the same string. But the builders changed it to 2 separate sets of rods, making the 4th floor walkway carry twice the weight it was designed for. The failure originated at the nut and washer connection that supported the 4th floor walkway. Here's one of the craziest parts. This terrible design change was never properly reviewed or analyzed. The change was just sort of approved without anyone doing the math to see if it would be safe. Communication between the engineers, architects, and construction workers was super bad. The structural engineer approved the drawings without realizing how the change would affect the walkways. Experts later said that if someone had just done a proper engineering review, they would have caught this problem and 114 people would still be alive. After such a terrible disaster, people wanted to make sure nothing like it would ever happen again. Big changes were made to how buildings are designed and checked for safety. The American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, created new rules to make sure structural engineers carefully check building plans before anything is built. They also made peer reviews stronger, which means other experts double-check designs to catch mistakes. New trade manuals were written to teach engineers how to build safer structures and regain public trust. To honor the victims and the brave first responders, a group called the Skywalk Memorial Foundation was created. Their goal was to make sure people never forgot what happened that night. After many years of work, on November 12, 2015, 34 years after the disaster, the Skywalk Memorial Plaza was opened in Kansas City's Hospital Hill Park. The main part of the memorial is a beautiful 24-foot stainless steel sculpture called Sending Love, made by artist Rita Blitt. It shows two figures dancing, remembering the people who were enjoying the tea dance that night. So what happened to the hotel? It's still standing today. The walkways were rebuilt, but instead of hanging from the ceiling, they now have strong pillars that go all the way to the ground. Because of these changes and many safety improvements, people say the hotel is now one of the safest buildings in the country. Let's make sure we never forget the lessons from this disaster. Share this story to spread awareness about the importance of safety in engineering and honor those who were affected. What are your thoughts on this construction disaster and the changes made? Drop your thoughts in the comments.